And it's Ken Kraetzer for CaMMVetsMedia. We cover cadets, midshipmen, military, and veterans proudly since 2008. And we are really glad today to have a talk with a veteran of the United States Navy, and that is Commander Tony Grayson. Commanded a nuclear submarine in the Navy, and now has gone into the data center, cloud computing world, and a lot of expertise to share. Commander Grayson, good to talk with you today. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm doing well, and thanks for inviting me on, Ken.
Absolutely. Well, I got to say, also a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy. I was down at the Naval Academy in Annapolis last week. Always good to visit there. Tell us a little bit about your career in the Navy, commanding a nuclear submarine, which is one of the preeminent roles in the entire U.S. military.
Yeah, I think the one thing about submarines that people don't get nowadays, it's the last vestige of true command. And any other, it doesn't matter what other service you're in, you're always in direct comms with higher headquarters. And so even if ships, airplanes, your boss is always there to tell you what to do. On a submarine, when you submerge and you go on mission, you're at a place where you can't transmit because they'll know exactly where you're at or the general area you're exactly at because of satellites. And so you have to make decisions with the crew that you have on board. And if you something bad happens, you will be front page of every single newspaper. And leaders of the countries that you're involved with will definitely be hearing about you in the morning. So your 40-year-old making those kind of decisions. It's I loved it, and that's kind of why I joined it. But looking back on it, it is amazing what we did when we were that young.
Absolutely. Now, as we mentioned, you're a graduate of the Naval Academy, and tell us a little bit about what you studied there and how it prepared you for your career that led to command.
I would say, I did control systems at the Naval Academy. Looking back, I wish I would have done more of the cyber stuff or, the computer science stuff. But, I think any of that engineering discipline does well. And it doesn't necessarily matter post Navy when you get out of a job because, it's just that rigor and how you learn is what matters. And so, even in the Navy too, unless you're doing something like nuclear engineering at which they do have degrees for that, it doesn't necessarily directly help you, but it still makes you think like you're doing it. Because I've seen plenty of history majors or poli-sci majors that have done very, very well on the nuclear side. So, I don't think it's really a hindrance. It's just how you think.
There you go. Well, I got to ask you, we have a friend whose son is starting out his career in submarines in the last couple of years. How do you find out that you can handle that very particular job of being underwater, out of communications with friends, family, for months at a time? How do you find out that you can handle that?
I think it's all volunteers to begin with, and everyone who does it is driven. But you go on some underways ahead of time that you do have people that sometimes, it rarely happens, but that just they can't handle it, and you have to pull out and do some kind of medevac or pull in and drop them off. And so those people kind of get weeded out before, you do anything on mission. The only problems on mission you ever have are true like medical emergencies and that kind of stuff. Because on a submarine, you just have a dock. You are not prepared to do any kind of surgeries, but they do a very, very good job of, in the replacement of that. And they're even doing docks and baby docks now on some of the ships, which I think is great. Or on some, sorry, on some of the boats, which I think is great. But it's you just kind of have to have that attitude. It's just you're living in a tube with a lot of people. Sometimes you're hot racking, you're walking 10 feet. It's just something you get used to. That's what, I always make the joke that, when COVID hit and we're all locked in our house, sounds good to me. I can sit in my house for a year and never go outside. I can even look out the window this time. So to me, it's nice. I don't have to, but when my wife went stir crazy, I had no problem.
Well, absolutely. Tell us a little bit about. I find the public doesn't really know that much about the submarine program. You've got the attack submarines that have come out, the Virginia class replacing the older Los Angeles class, like the one that you commanded. And then I actually got to the keel laying of the USS Columbia, the new ballistic missile
Yep.
submarine up in Quonset Point, Rhode Island. What tell us a little bit about why the submarine program is really vital.
But it's vital because, we're the ones who can get in where no one else can. If you're flying like some kind of rivet joint ISR bird, they're going to know you're there and they're going to act differently. On a submarine, they don't know you're there and they do their daily operations. And so it's not just I'm going to go trail some out of area deployer that's like some kind of submarine and they don't know you're there, which is always pretty fun, or trail some surface action group, letting higher headquarters know where they're at. It's also getting in close to where they are at and intercepting their comms and doing that kind of stuff, or watching exercises and getting data on like missile warhead frequencies and that kind of stuff. So it's not, I think people just think of it that we're out there trailing other submarines, which is what we do, but we're also doing this ISR thing. But if you can imagine, you're shoving like a 360-foot attack submarine in very, very shallow water. And I can't kind of talk about how shallow you can go, but
Yeah.
let's just say you can get in pretty shallow with those submarines. But it's somewhat nerve-wracking because it's like best way to describe it when you're at periscope depth, it's like a slow train wreck. Like if someone turns at I mean, you can only go a certain amount of speed because you don't want the wake on the surface of your periscope. So you're like trying to get off their track at like 4 knots and they're going like 6 knots. And so it's like, well, they might be close, but we can go have lunch and come back in an hour and a half and see if they are really close.
Oh gosh, out of some of the Tom
Oh, I mean,
Clancy
some of this, I
thrillers.
mean, if you could imagine, it's just imagine going to hang out off the coast of Port Canaveral, which we train a lot. All the fishing boats come out in the morning, they all go back at night. That's what you're playing. It's the ultimate game of Frogger out there when you're doing those kind of missions.
Well, that's great. We appreciate your service, everyone who you've served with and commanded in the Navy. Now, tell us a little bit about your transition from the Navy, having an incredibly responsible position, to going off into the corporate data industry. You worked at companies like Facebook, Amazon, Oracle, and now Compass Data Centers. How did you make that transition?
It's I got lucky for one thing. It was right place, right time to get picked up by Facebook on a job right outside of the Navy. And I didn't really have to look for it. This was on the Facebook hiring kick where they were hiring a bunch of nukes. So, I was originally brought in to do ops, but I ended up doing something else. But I guess, what people don't know is I think it's amazing that a submarine has like 10 megawatts of IT load. You actually have a cloud inside a submarine. And so you're managing that cloud. You just don't know you're managing a cloud. So, I mean, you're managing containers, you're managing, inside these containers is your fire control, your sonar, networking based on problems you have. So when I went to Facebook, it kind of clicked that I knew more about cloud and the architecture of cloud, not just the hardware layer, but the software layer and the whole platform more than I thought. And so that's what I spent my time learning to make sure that I understood all of that and try to do more and more each of the progressive jobs that I was in. But that's the kind of thing with the military. You never really know what you truly know until you get out. And that's why we have a hard time during transitioning because, a great example I will say is fire control on a submarine. I can guarantee on the resume they probably conducted maintenance, trailed other stuff, did fire control. They don't talk about the fact that they're managing basically a 10 megawatt data center, that's controlling everything on board their submarine from the networks, to the servers, to, cooling, heating. They don't put that on their resume, but that's something that they do. And that's something that I think we need to do a better job of raising awareness on. And that's what I try to do with a lot of my videos is show people what we're doing out there. I mean, go look at the carrier deck. And that's what I think I would like to post a lot of videos of carrier decks. I mean, those are average age of 19 years old. I mean, and that's what that's doing. And what the military brings is, you know, for people on the outside, it's you just never know, but it's a team first mentality. And you just don't get that in the outside world where it seems to be everything for me. I don't want to work in that kind of area. I want, back to the team where we have mission first and everyone's out for each other, not out for themselves. And that's what I think you can't teach that kind of stuff. And that's why, also I think we tend to overlook. I can teach anything. I can't teach, someone's attitude or their work ethic or something like that. That's just something that they have. And that's what I think we need to do a better job of selling. You might have to, maybe when you hire a veteran, they might have to train them a little bit longer, but I can guarantee at the end you're going to get a better product than you do hiring someone else who doesn't grow up with that team first mentality or mission first mentality. And yes, there are some bad eggs out there, but I can guarantee, that's probably 98% are going to be good and maybe 2% bad. On the other way, it's a, even if you have great interviews, it's a, kind of up, it's a toss up.
Very good. Well, certainly artificial intelligence is on everybody's topic list right now. I actually asked a question at a meeting in New York this week of a banker about what happens when you combine AI and cyber, and he said a lot of concerns.
Yep.
How do you feel about AI right now as an opportunity and also as something as a concern?
I mean, I think it's a huge opportunity right now, and it's not as people say. I mean, we think AI as Chat GPT and writing our papers for us or writing notes on LinkedIn or, doing that kind of stuff. That's not what the benefit's going to be. I mean, there's only two ways to make money on AI. It's AI as a service and this thing called inference. But inference is more than just text space. It's, there's this thing called agentic AI, which is decision making. So imagine you're a chip manufacturer and you have all these HD cameras, then it has to decide within a certain milliseconds if that chipset meets quality control, or you are in a city with a high rate of pedestrian deaths, Las Vegas, and you have a system that's developed that looks at you step foot in a crosswalk and it has a camera that looks at oncoming traffic and has to decide within 5 milliseconds if it's going to turn that light red. Like that is what AI is really going to help us out. I mean, this isn't job stuff. It's a, kind of this machine to machine decision making that does things that we can't necessarily do in a quick fashion. So think personal safety but even, you know, imagine on a RAN kind of network. So some kind of 5G network, 10,000 people recording a 60-second video that can't go back to Ashburn to get processed. It's going to have to be this local compute. And so I think we're still this beginning phase of what we always used to call edge, but you already seen it in DoD. It's distributed compute is the way ahead, is the future, pushing that compute closer to where the data is created. Now the military does it because they know that they'll probably lose network connectivity and they have to be able to fight alone with that services. In the civilian world, it's different that, you can't transfer all that data or you can't meet the latency that you need for your certain platform. So I think there's a lot more opportunities open up. We have to get past this just it's Chat GPT text-based silliness. It's going to be a lot more than that.
Absolutely. Now you continue in your capacities to work on defense projects. I know you mentioned you're doing a project at the Air Force Academy, but just the importance of data management within the military, and also, as I mentioned earlier, on the cyber front. What's top of mind for you?
Yeah, but I think we've had this shift in DoD, but we're not really talking about it. It's not really getting out there, but there's a new face of warfare across the world, and Ukraine's really shown us that. It's, data is a weapon system now, that the cyber environment is more hostile than ever, and modern warfare is software defined. Everything that we are doing is built around that kind of stuff. So it doesn't matter if you have the best warhead or whatever, or you have a hypersonic missile without having good data for targeting or having a good seeker, which is software, it's not going to work. And so everything now needs to revolve around that kind of data and software piece, but also with the understanding that cyber is out there, and it's not only foreign adversaries, it's people doing stuff for extortion, it's people doing stuff because they like being hacking into stuff, just like there's people that like to be, white hat hackers and pen test systems. I think we overlook all this stuff and for what we think is cool. Like the F-35 is the F-35, not because of I mean, it is because of the aero and stuff like that, but it's because it's a modern warfare built around software. And that's, and the data it does. And so you have to be able to control that kind of stuff. That's why, in terms of AI, defense is ahead of enterprise right now because they know they have to fight, disconnected. So they're already pushing compute platforms as far close to the front lines as they can because that's how they know they're going to have to be able to fight the next war. Where we in enterprise are still trying to figure that out.
Absolutely. And talk with Commander Tony Grayson, former US Navy submarine commander, and now general manager of Compass Data Centers. Tell us a little bit about Compass Data Centers, if you would.
Yeah, so I was extremely fortunate. When I left Oracle, I wanted to go on the other side of the business, and I was offered an opportunity to take an incubated startup underneath Compass, where Compass is focused on really, the big, so think, GCP, Google, Azure, AWS, and building large campuses. I'm on the exact opposite, where I'm doing more modular deployments and focused on not only, of course, those cloud providers, but I'm also focused on enterprise, helping them do hybrid multi-cloud and defense for what we're doing right now. So, I got to run a startup that had a huge safety net where, I had great leadership that taught me how to, kind of build and run a company. But I never really had to worry about where the money's coming because the money would come from my parent company. So it really was the best form of a startup you can ever have because you're being incubated by another company, and they're helping you grow, and you can actually make good decisions that aren't forced by financial decisions, kind of long-term decisions that are better. So, I was allowed to figure this, to do a complete gut and restart of the company in a year without trying to bring in revenue because of that kind of thing. And I know I'm very super fortunate, but I highly recommend, being on a big company side and this, being on this side and running your own business. I really enjoy running your own business side more than the big company side. And it's because the politics necessarily aren't there. You can work with smaller teams and focus on and getting stuff done and working on cool mission sets. And I'm not trying to say all companies that are big that are like that. It's just it's a different kind of feel, if you will, that I really like. And it gets me almost back to what I loved about submarines. It's 130 people rowing together in a small thing. It's an aircraft carrier is a very different animal where there's 5,000 people. I like that, just based on my background, I like that 130 people all working together towards a similar goal than the 5,000 all working together.
Very good. And maybe a final thought today about needs of your fellow veterans. We've followed over the years a lot of work from the veterans associations like the American Legion promoting health care for veterans, education, the amazing value of the GI Bill, and then career transition assistance. What are some of the things that really stand out of needs for your generation of veterans?
I mean, I think you have to help veterans translate their skills into what they can actually do, but also recognize that you are going to might hire two veterans for one job because you're going to have to train them to get to that point. But in the end, you're going to be better off. It's just it takes a longer time to get to that value stream, but you end up having a much better worker. But we always want it now. And so veterans kind of get pushed off for people that, kind of maybe have had that experience and may studied that. But, in the end, what do we really care about when doing business? It's a TCO, not necessarily initial CapEx. It's the same thing. Who's going to bring you value over a longer time? So I think it's understanding that, giving veterans a chance, but we also need to do a better job of looking at programs. A great example is I love SkillBridge. There are people who take advantage of SkillBridge. I've talked to a company who basically their entire company was filled with SkillBridge people doing the business with very few permanent employees, and they were basically had no money for headcount. They were just using SkillBridge people. So there's definitely people out there that do take advantage of this stuff in the system. I'm not saying they're all like that, but we need to do a better job of making sure what we're really doing is good for the veterans. And I do think we tend to forget that as we get into our own companies and hire. Like if you're saying I'm gonna help you as a veteran only if you come into my company, that is the wrong attitude. You should care less where that veteran goes. If the veteran goes to a rival company, you should be happy you got him a job in that rival company. So I think we also need to baseline ourselves sometimes that our success is the veteran's success, no matter where they go. This is not about and what you're really doing when you try to get in your own company is your own ego. It has nothing to do with helping out the veterans. So I think we as veterans also need to take a hard look at ourselves and figure out what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Well, Commander Tony Grayson, veteran of the United States Navy, US Submarine Commander, graduate of the US Naval Academy, and have had an extraordinary career in the data center field, general manager now of Compass Data Center. Great to talk with you today. And as I said, all veterans, thank you for your service to our country.
No, thank you, Ken, and thank you for bringing me up and thank you for having me.
Well, good to see you. I hope we can do this again. And it's Ken Kraetzer for CAM Vets Media. We cover cadets, midship, and the military and veterans proudly since 2008. Thank you for watching.